Welcome to the Missouri Historical Society's Library and Research Center. I am Magdalene Link. This is part of Making Missouri, a year-long look at the 200th anniversary of Missouri's statehood. This month we're focusing on cultural heritage, and I'm here to explore early Missouri foodways. When they first arrived in St. Louis in the latter 18th century, early settlers found an abundance of natural resources. There were chestnuts and pecans, melons and peaches, pawpaws and berries, wheat and corn. There were prairie hens, rabbits, turkey, buffalo, and elk. While this was true for those living along the Mississippi, agricultural and food traditions varied across the state. Further east, bears and deer were more abundant, and commercial hunting was very profitable. Throughout the state, food was plentiful and varied, and the landscape changed rapidly. By the early 19th century, everything had become remarkably like American foodways we'd recognize today. Different types of sugar, candies, and imported tea could be purchased locally or from companies in St. Genevieve. Pork and bacon were sent in from states just slightly to the east, like Ohio. Citrus fruits, spices, and even chocolate were all available. Agriculture changed as well, with an increased production of rye, barley, different types of potatoes, and non-native apples and peaches. We're going to explore these early food traditions by making a baked apple pudding from Mrs. Mary Randolph's The Virginia Housewife, first published in 1824. I'll be making this dessert in my modern kitchen, but first, let's look at some of the tools you may have used if you had made this recipe in the early 19th century. Here we have sugar nips, perfect for picking up sugar. A grater and a zester, perfect for lemons and other fruits. A sieve, which could have been used in a similar way to a potato ricer or would have been used more like a strainer today. And finally, a rolling pin, which hasn't changed much. Now that we know what we'll need, let's see how we can make a baked apple pudding. Here is the recipe for baked apple pudding, adapted from Mrs. Mary Randolph's The Virginia Housewife, first published in 1824. For this recipe, you will need pie dough, or paste as it was called, preferably homemade but store-bought will do, 1 pound of apples, you can use any apples you like, a ½ pound of butter, softened, a ½ pound of sugar plus a little extra for dusting, the zest of 2 lemons, and 6 eggs. The first thing we want to do is line a pie pan with our pie dough or paste. Once lined, set aside. Next, we want to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. While we're waiting for the oven to preheat, let's get our apples peeled, cored, and roughly chopped. Then we're going to spread the apples onto a baking tray. If you want, you can use a tiny bit of nonstick cooking spray or butter to stop them from sticking. Once the oven is preheated, we're going to bake our apples for about 20 to 30 minutes until they're nice and soft. We don't want them to burn or get too dark in color, we're just looking for a light golden color. If you're not sure the apples are soft enough, gently press down on them with the back of a wooden spoon. The original 1824 recipe instructs you to rub the apples through a sieve, but I'm going to carefully transfer them into a mixing bowl and use a potato masher to mash them up. If you have a good sieve or potato ricer, that'll also work. We want the texture to look like applesauce. It's okay if it's not super smooth, it'll still come together in the end. Before it cools off too much, add in the butter, sugar, and lemon zest. Give it a good mix. Crack the eggs into a separate bowl and beat well. Slowly pour the beaten eggs into the apple mixture and give it a few more stirs until it is well combined. Don't panic if your mixture looks too runny. Slowly pour this mixture into our prepared pie shell and bake for about 40 to 60 minutes until the top is nice and golden brown and there is a slight wobble in the center. I strongly recommend placing the pie pan onto a baking tray or putting one on a lower rack in your oven because I found that it did bubble over a bit. Once the pudding has cooled slightly, sprinkle the top with a little sugar. Let cool completely so that it has time to set, then slice and serve. Well, the baked apple pudding turned out to be incredibly delicious. It was really like a custard pie with lovely bits of apple throughout. It was incredibly buttery, but I don't really see why that has to be a bad thing. So before we made our pudding, we looked at some kitchen tools you might have used if you had made this recipe in the early 19th century. Now let's look at how you might have enjoyed your dessert. Here we have a lovely Fan's dessert plate that belonged to Auguste Chateau and descended through the Chateau family. It's decorated really simply but elegantly, and this plate would have been a perfect setting for your indulgent apple dessert. We also have this tiny silver nutmeg grater, and wealthy individuals would bring their own pocket-sized nutmeg grater and would have added a little bit of grated nutmeg to their plate. I hope that you've enjoyed exploring early Missouri foodways and really hope that you can try creating your own dessert. Even if you don't make your own baked apple pudding, I hope that this encourages you to maybe plant a native vegetable in your garden or to seek out some Missouri-grown fruit so that you can be a part of history. Thank you to our members and donors and the ZMD Tax District. Check out our website and our social media channels to find out more content from this project.